Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Risk Takers and Trailblazers Women in Insurance podcast with your hosts, Helen, Jen, Diane, and myself. And today we're so happy to have Tony Canas join us. He's a seasoned insurance evangelist and a leading voice in the industry. Tony brings over a decade of rich experience in claims, underwriting, finance, and sales, and he's currently the recruiting partner at Goodman Recruiting, where he spearheads the insurance and insurtech vertical. He is also the mastermind behind Profiles and Risk, the largest podcast in the insurtech space. With a profound understanding of the insurance industry's challenges and opportunities, Tony is here to share his insights on the evolving landscape of insurance, the role of women in shaping its future, and of course, the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also know Tony personally when we met him at Amplify Broker Tech Fest last September, and it's really important to note, everyone, that Tony was our earliest supporter when we launched the podcast. He gave us shout outs, he shared our posts, and Tony, that means a lot to us. So welcome to the show, and we are so happy to have you
Thank
here.
you. I like to introduce with above and beyond anything else, I'm basically a giant insurance nerd, just one that doesn't easily fit in the box kind of thing. I started, so I grew up in Costa Rica. By the way, the Canada flag is because this is ultimately a Canadian podcast, right? But I grew up in Costa Rica. I've worked my entire career in the U.S. I worked in transportation for 3 years, hated it. And then in 2009, I got downsized when the U.S. economy tanked, and I was living in Des Moines, Iowa, which is the second largest insurance city in the U.S. after Hartford, Connecticut. So I ended up at the Farm Bureau call center, literally taking the call when somebody had a claim. And it turned out to be a wonderful job, like a really well-managed call center. Their training was fantastic. They really taught us about insurance. They really taught us about insurance careers. They really taught us why Farm Bureau is different from Progressive and Geico. They really gave us kind of the tools to be successful. So I was there for about a year, and they really pushed the insurance education part. So I got my AINS and my AIC while I was there and finished my MBA, and very quickly got hired by Nationwide, also in Des Moines, so much bigger company. And that took me off of the call center, put me in entry-level claims. That second year in claims was a lot worse than the first year. And I found a couple of things. Number one, the bigger company was a lot of fun. But I found thousands of kids. And by the way, kids is anybody younger than me at this point, 41. So anybody 40 and younger, kids. Okay. So just a whole bunch of recent college grads working in the call center, just being treated like fifth graders, with no autonomy over their job, with getting paid not enough to cover their student loans, and with no visibility to the great careers in the rest of the company, the rest of the industry. I was lucky not to be in that call center, but I made many friends there. Got really involved. During that year, I got both my CPCU, and I became really involved with the CPC Society, with Toastmasters, and with the Nationwide Gen Y ARG, or basically the young employee group at Nationwide. And so I spent a total of 4 years at Nationwide, worked in 4 different offices, 4 different jobs, including a leadership development program. But really, the biggest thing, I really fell in love with the intersection of generations and the insurance employment. And especially, we were already talking about the upcoming retirement of the boomers, which, by the way, peak 65 this year in the US. I don't know about Canada, but the retirements we've been talking about are definitely here. They're hitting us hard. We were already talking about that 14, 15 years ago. So I fell in love with that topic of how those two things intersect. And I'm not a primary researcher, but what I am is a big nerd. So basically, I read everything I could get my hands on, whether it was academic research or like McKinsey and Deloitte papers or whatever about millennials. And I started bringing that into the insurance space, first through the Nationwide group. And then when I left Nationwide, I really missed that work. So that's how Insurance Nerds was born, to continue doing that for the rest of the industry. So after I left Nationwide, I spent a year at American Modern as a field sales manager. then I went to Liberty for 2 years as a middle market underwriter. And at that point, I was really involved in speaking at conferences about how to engage millennials in the insurance industry. My girlfriend also worked in the industry. Her career took off a lot faster than mine. I kind of chose the lateral path, not to become a manager. She went straight up the chain and became the youngest VP at a global broker. And in the broker space, so some VPs are just salespeople that have hit goals. Renee was an actual like operational VP. She was running the entire small commercial service team for this giant global broker, who I'm being very careful not to name by name. Every other company I'm cool about mentioning by name, but anyway. Renee's career had grown really fast, and we were both remote. One day she came home from manager meetings at headquarters, and she literally told me, "You're they don't get it. You have to write the book." So sat down with my co-author Carly and co-founder of Insurance Nerds, and in 90 days we wrote Insuring Tomorrow, which is the book on how to engage and retain millennials. So that was mid 2017. So the book comes out, and Liberty starts getting really squirrely about having me on payroll. So basically, I made myself so well known in the industry that basically became unemployable in the carrier space, because the carriers are so conservative. It's like, we love you, we can't have you on payroll. So it didn't get to a point where they showed me the door, but it became clear that it wasn't going to work out. And the speaking engagements and stuff, which I was doing using my vacation time, I just didn't have enough vacation time to do everything I wanted to do. So I left Liberty and went to the Jacobson Group, which is the largest recruiting firm within insurance. And that was an amazing move. It's a wonderful company, because they for them, all my involvement in the industry is good marketing for the recruiting services, right? So I spent 4.5 years there, and then almost 2 years ago now, went off on my own and kind of starting my own little recruiting firm, while continuing to run Insurance Nerds, continuing to run the Profits and Risk podcast, chatwithtony.com, which is a passion project through Insurance Nerds, which is basically free career advice for any insurance professional. So I ended up in a really cool spot where my day job at the recruiting firm that I run is helping insurance companies, brokers, and insurtechs find talent. And then on the Chat with Tony side, which is kind of my volunteer activity, those are 400 conversations a year with insurance people at all levels, all the way to like VPs and above. So I get a really cool view of the talent, not only from the employer's perspective, but also what the talent is saying they want, right? So yeah, I could not have planned it this way. It was very much an accident, and that's where I am today, right? A burning passion for insurance and insurance careers, and so yeah, that's kind of the quickest version of the story.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't even like know half that, because coming into today, I was like, well, I know Tony. I don't have to do much research. Like, we know Tony.
So notice, and I will be very careful about this. I have not worked a day of my life at either a broker or an insurtech, right? And yet I'm a carrier guy. I very much grew up in the carrier space. Yeah. I do work every day with brokers and with insurtechs as a recruiter. And back when I was an underwriter and a sales manager for carriers, I did work closely with brokers, but I've never worked at a broker. So I always have to be very careful, because I have a lot of thoughts about brokers, and especially the talent side of the agencies and brokerages. But I have to be very careful to make it clear, I've never actually worked in one.
Tony, are your thoughts about brokers that they're so awesome?
So 1,000% in the US, and I'm guessing Canada is very similar, but the whole disintermediation of brokers is not going to happen, right? In fact, if there is one, what's it called? One trend that I've noticed over and over and over on the podcast, which we now have 540 episodes. And by the way, the podcast, I didn't build it myself. My friend Nick Lamparelli, it was his idea. And we did the first 15 episodes together. Then he ran with it for 160 episodes. And then I took it back over and I ran it for the last 300 and some. So I stand on the shoulders of giants. But there's a definite trend where the early insurtechs, the earlier they are, the more likely they are to be talking about disintermediating the agents. And later waves of insurtechs, or the more mature insurtechs that have survived, are looking to partner with agents. Yeah, the agents are not going anywhere. Now, having said that, because agencies tend to be smaller organizations by number of people than carriers, they do tend to be behind on HR, on talent development, on hiring, on diversity and inclusion. A lot of the horror stories that I hear from women in the industry come from the broker space because they're smaller companies. It does happen in the carrier side, but it happens more often on the broker space. And the other thing that happens in the broker space, again, in the US, I'm not as familiar with the Canada market, brokers don't retire.
Yeah.
They don't. Like, why would they? If you have a solid book of business and you've got a good service team to manage that book of business, especially in commercial lines, you might be working 10 hours a week. But why would you ever retire, right?
Yeah.
So you end up with a 75-year-old still running things, and they're less than modern in their approach. And in fact, one of my great mentors in Iowa, Ted Lucem, sold his agency in '89. I joined insurance in 2009. I got my CPC in 2011. I met him in late 2011. So notice how many years after he sold his agency. Basically, he sold his agency, but he kept an office and kept showing up every day until he passed away in 2021. I went back to Iowa to go to his funeral. So yeah, even after selling, he just could not give it up. Now, Ted was a special character, amazing guy, loved what he did, loved his clients, never had kids. So the agency really was his baby. But it's not an unusual story that brokers never retire.
No. And yeah, I think that's really interesting. That you're kind of calling that out. I do think, like, what are you seeing? You know, I had a question about new talent. Like, what are you seeing over in the US in terms of new, younger people coming into the industry?
Yeah, this is my favorite topic, basically. Okay. So we continue to do a really crappy job of marketing insurance as a career at the college and at the high school level. There's fragmented efforts here and there, but we have not come together as an industry to really do it, which is what's really needed here. We have about 80 risk management programs, RMI, risk management and insurance programs. 80 sounds like a lot, but you have to remember there's about 3,500 colleges and universities in the US. Out of those, I would guess 2,000 of them have business schools, and I would guess 100% of those 2,000 have accounting and finance and marketing. Most of them have management information systems. Most of them have logistics. Only 80 of them have RMI. And even those 80 programs, all of the kids, 99.9% of the kids that study RMI don't go to that school to study RMI. They go to that school to study business. And then Gamma Iota Sigma, which is a wonderful organization, has a free pizza event with a great speaker. They come for the pizza and the speaker convinces them to switch majors and they never regret it. Right?
Oh, wow.
Like time after time after, I have asked so many Gamma kids, because Insurance Nerds has been involved with Gamma for a long time. So I've gone to a couple of Gamma conferences and I've asked so many Gamma kids, so how did you end up majoring in RMI? Right? And the story is almost always that. I showed up at the school to study business and they had a free pizza party and a great speaker. And they never regret it. And they have amazing careers. So the RMI kids only feed 10 to 15% of our hiring needs on any given year. So 85% of us, we continue to be the Allen of misfit toys. 85% of us come from non-insurance backgrounds. I would guess about half of those have a business degree and about half don't. And it's one of the things that makes insurance so interesting, because we're staffed by philosophy and psychology and anthropology and art history and all sorts of crazy majors that find a home here. Okay. So we recruit them at the beginning, and then we keep some of them, not as many as I would like, right? So we suck at the attracting them to the industry. We get them because we have paid internships, which a lot of industries have unpaid internships, at least in the States. I hope that's not legal in Canada. Hopefully it won't be legal in the States for long, but it is right now. We have paid internships, and we have decently paid entry-level jobs. So we get them, but the entry-level job has really changed. And the leadership doesn't know it, by the way. If you go talk to somebody who is in the leadership of an insurance carrier today, who's over 50, their entry-level job was very different. The entry-level job today is a call center, right? And they're not very engaging jobs.
Yeah.
And they give you no visibility on how to grow in the industry, right? So many of those kids, we just lose them. A few of them, we get lucky, and they find good mentorship, or they get pushed into doing CPCU, and that gets them engaged in the industry and helps them grow. Or on YouTube or Google, they run into me and insurance nerds, and we give them the advice they need to grow. Or they end up on Reddit. Reddit has a great sub, which I'm not allowed to mention by name because it's like Fight Club. But anyway, they end up in one of those communities because they went out and they Googled how to grow my insurance career. But I'm guessing 85 to 90% of them don't do that, and we just lose them.
You made a great statement, and I just want to go back to it for a second, is that most jobs today that you mentioned are call center type or contact center, as we call ours. But what about the whole work from home and the hybrid? Do you feel that has absolutely changed their interaction, their visibility, and some of their skills?
Yeah. So remote and hybrid are a whole different topic that I am really, really passionate about. I published a video, I think it was 2018, maybe early 2019, before COVID, where I basically said, if you're not remote, if you're an insurance organization and you're not remote friendly, you either have bad management or bad technology. Okay. And then COVID happened, and there was that magical Thursday where we were all sent home, told, take your computer and we'll see how it goes. And then we got an email Friday night saying, don't come back. And then that lasted a year and a half, right? Yeah. So it turns out I didn't see the back end, right? I'm sure the IT people went crazy, and I'm sure a lot of money was spent in making sure we could work remotely right away. But the point is, we have the technology now, right? So the only thing that's left is bad management. Okay. So I would bet my 401k that not a single carrier or large broker, maybe a small broker, but not a single carrier or broker will win the RTO fight. It's just a matter of time. It keeps happening the exact same way. They announce the RTO, all the best people leave because they have remote opportunities, and then it's so hard to replace those people, and it's so much more expensive, and you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, basically. Okay, but the young crowd and remote. Okay, millennials like myself. By the way, millennials are not kids anymore. I'm 41. I'm on the other edge of the millennials, right? So millennials like myself, we worked for 10 to 15 years, and before COVID hit, we had 1 to 2 work from home days a week, and that felt good compared to the prior experience, right? But majority of us prefer completely remote. Okay, Gen Zers gets even more interesting because Gen Zers, many of them were in school, like in college or late high school, right? The ones that are in the workforce now, when COVID happened,
right?
They missed out on.
Absolutely.
They did remote internships. They started their first job remote. That sub generation of Gen Zers that didn't have an in-person college experience for most of their college career, for a good part of their college career, doesn't have the skills to handle the office successfully. They're going to need a lot of help. So Gen Zers, there's some research from before COVID. I read it in Gen Z at Work with the letter with the ad, like an email. It's a great book. father and son team. One of them's a Gen Xers, the other one's a Gen Zer. Gen Zers are such digital natives. In fact, they're mobile natives, right? Because millennials are digital natives, Gen Zers are mobile natives. They see the world, including the working world, as a physical world. Physical is a portmanteau of the word physical and the word digital. Basically, in their lives, everything physical has had a digital counterpart, right? Cars have apps, kind of thing. Okay, your fridge has an app, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So for them, it doesn't compute. Why do I have to be in person unless it's for a specific reason? Now, with that said, early in their career, they do want to be in the office because they do understand that it's the better way to learn and to network and to understand company culture. Okay, but we hit a really weird dilemma, which is if we force if the young kids coming to the office, whether being forced or not, and the office is empty, right? Then
it's so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Are they getting that mentorship? Yes.
Then they're not getting what they need. And on the other hand, if we force the more experienced crowd to come in so that there's somebody there for the Gen Zers, then we lose them. So we still need to figure that out, right? This is an unanswered question. One thing I can tell you is, as an industry, we suck. I don't know if I can say suck, by the way. As an industry, we suck at remote recruiting. We suck at remote training.
Yeah.
We need to get better at that. Quite simply.
Yeah.
Right.
I love what you said, Tony, about like what you said there about, they're going to need a lot of help. And I think, like, and I also love like the talk track of, we haven't figured it out yet. Right. So whether there's no right or wrong or what have you, but there's these facts. So what are we going to do about it as an industry, as companies? Right.
I am not a remote absolutist. Even though I've been remote for a long time, and my girlfriend was remote for the last several years also. I do think there are things that benefit from in-person. Training benefits from in-person. You can get good at remote training, but there's nothing like in-person training, especially if you're gonna put me through 8 hours of class.
Yes.
Like don't even attempt to do that on Zoom, right? Like bring me in. Strategic work benefits from being in person. Team building benefits from being in person. Okay. At a large insurance corporation, the percentage of the time that an entry or mid-level person is doing one of those three things outside of the first couple of months of employment is probably 10 to 15% of the time, if that, right? So I think that the Jacobson, when they hired me, and this was in 2018, they were very smart about it. I was the first remote from the beginning employee. They had people that had moved out of Chicago or that lived in a city, and then in 2009 they closed the office and the person stayed in that city. But I was the first hired remote from the beginning. What they did with me is they brought me into Chicago for the first 2 weeks and intensive training. And then they said, come back once a month. And you can choose when and for how long. So sometimes I went for a week, sometimes I went for a day. And that worked really well. But if you were to do that today, when I go in, nobody would be there, or very, very few people would be there. So I think that the right solution is figure out how often you need them physically together, and then bring them in.
Yeah.
Whether it's once a quarter, whether once a month, right? And by the way, doing it that way allows you to the least days per month that somebody needs to be in the office, the furthest your geographic reach when it comes to recruiting, right? So if I'm forcing you into the office 4 days a week, I can't recruit somebody that's further than 30 or 40 miles out, or 60, 70 kilometers out, because it's just a horrible commute then, right? Or I have to relocate you, and nobody will relocate anymore, which is something that we haven't talked about yet. But on the other hand, if you only need to come in once a week, then I have friends that now have a 4-hour commute once a week.
Yeah.
Right. And they make it work. But yeah, the more that you don't have to bring them in often, the more that you can recruit from anywhere in the country, and that really opens up your opportunities. And by the way, let's say that you're a small brokerage in, rural wherever. So you're like, there's no traffic here, housing is cheap, right? We all have a 10-minute commute. Like, why wouldn't people want to come in? Well, the bad news is that there's a brokerage in Chicago or New York or California that is more than happy to let them be remote.
Yes.
And that will steal them away. Right? A lot of what I do for a living in my recruiting firm is exactly that. It's steal people away who are perfectly happy where they're at, but they want to stay remote or only go to the office when they want to.
But then what about but on that train too, think about the opportunities that you're getting if you're going to be working for, a national or global organization, allowing the work from home. And, so versus the small rural, I'm going in every day. So I think that's
and by the way, career-wise, so when somebody calls chat with Tony for career advice, I encourage in their early career, I encourage them to go into the office. I make it very clear. We suck at training, and you want to build those connections, right? I encourage them to go into the office, and then they complain that nobody's there. But for my advice to my clients who hired me to recruit for them is the more remote you can make it, the better. There's recruiters in the States, in our space in insurance, that simply won't touch roles that are not remote because they're finding them impossible to fill. We'll still try, but we make it very, very clear up front. It's going to take 5 times as long. It's going to cost you 30 or 40% more in salary. And like, if what the person wanted was to be remote, how are you going to keep them afterwards when so much of the rest of the industry is being remote friendly?
Yeah, we shut down we made that decision to go fully remote and give and bolster our meeting training budget, getting together budgets per manager, per location. I mean, obviously it's got a long way to go, but it's exciting, and it's exciting to get out of the office in those environments, even if you're just renting a WeWork space for the day and then going for some dinner or whatever that looks like, or whatever. It's fun. It's actually really fun.
I think long term, every insurance organization will go in that direction. You might as well do it now and get good at it and be ahead of it, and not have to replace half your people.
It's crazy how fast it has, relatively fast it has changed. Because I'm like sitting here thinking about 2010 when I bought a new office space in South Calgary, and my recruiting technique was, hey, you don't want to drive downtown anymore? Come work at a brokerage far south. And that was what I was looking for, like people that wanted to come work in South Calgary. Like, that's only 14 years ago. Relative, I
know,
not that long.
I remember the
years.
Oh, yeah.
The brokerage I was at before, before the whole goose environment. I remember feeling they were really like kind of proactive, and because I had my first kid at the time, and I remember her, she'd be sick from daycare, and they that was when they took the Tylenol away from daycare, so you couldn't give your kid Tylenol and then send them to daycare, which was probably a good thing. And I remember the brokerage I was working with was like, oh, don't worry. Like they hooked me up with a phone. And because again, by the time you pick your sick child up from daycare, you put them down for a nap, they're sleeping for 4 hours. So then what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and watch TV. So I remember feeling really lucky that back then, I think same thing, Diana, was like somewhere around 2010, 2011. And I'm thinking, oh, this is an awesome perk. Like, at least I can still get my work done. Anyways, it just seems mind blowing now.
That is a perfect transition to I think what is really most important for this particular podcast, which is that the population we have lost by the RTO mandates are women. The disability employment rate increased exponentially during COVID, right? So ultimately, I think that the industry, and this is not just insurance in general, the overall, we are looking at remote versus RTO versus hybrid wrong. We need to reframe this conversation into what it is. Remote is a DEI issue.
It absolutely
Because right, and because the executives, most of whom are in our industry are older white men. Baby boomers who statistically have a lot more stay-at-home wives than Xers or millennials and probably Gen Zers going forward, right? They don't understand. They've never lived it. They don't understand what it's like to have a dual income household, and statistically speaking, in most couples, when somebody's got to step back, it's generally the mom.
Yep.
And right, the fact that we still have a pay gap doesn't help that.
Absolutely.
Because even if you look at it from a completely financial point of view, right, if she's making less in the couple because women on average are making less, she's more likely to take the hit, right? And by the way, never recover.
It's so true,
right?
Tony. You don't recover. Yeah.
And our industry at the macro level, the carrier side of insurance, and again, these are US numbers, somewhere between 55 and 60% of insurance employees in the US are women. Okay, somewhere between 100% of account managers and CSRs at agencies in the States, like it's incredible, it's like 97%, right, are women, right? Women very much run our industry today. But then you look upstairs, right, and each level you have less and less women, to the point that out of the top 100 carriers in the US, so I don't know how many of those are Fortune 500, but out of the top 100 carriers, there's exactly 2 female CEOs. There's so few of them that I met them both at the same conference last year. Because they were both speaking at the same, like every female CEO of a top 100 carrier, right? I'm so bad with names, but basically AF Group, Accident Fund of Michigan, and Tokyo Marine HCC, and that's it, right? It's sad, truly sad, and as an industry, it's not only bad for you guys, it's bad for the industry, right? And by the way, like racial diversity and LGBT diversity, like every other diversity you can think of, it's the same issue. The higher up you look, right, into the VP level, the C level, and the board, and the research is very clear that companies that have more diverse leadership perform better, right? So it's not just a matter of I morally believe that it's the right thing, which matters to me, but even if you disagree with that, from a purely performance perspective, companies with diverse leadership do better. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
It was interesting at Amplify. There was one thing, well, there's a lot of things, but I remember at Amplify when Margot and Emma called out that whole role of CSR and account management has been, it's a female role. It's a female role, has been forever. And it's a caretaking role. It's a detail-orientated role. It's a retention role. It's all of these things. And how amazing are those skill sets upstairs?
The CSR and account managers are the lifeblood of every agency, because the renewal book depends on them, right? They're the lifeblood of every agency, and they are criminally underpaid compared to the producers. And by the way, the same thing happens on the carrier side with underwriting assistants, which historically is staffed largely by women, and historically has not been used as a stepping stone into becoming an underwriter, which would make perfect sense. Some carriers are working on that, but basically we have the same issue on both sides of the industry, and it is not sustainable. let me put it. I gave a presentation at a fantastic Midwestern carrier. I think that I can name them, that at Westfield Insurance. So Westfield Insurance is based out of Westfield, Ohio, which is in the middle of nowhere, 45 minutes from Cleveland, an hour and a half from Columbus, neither of which are particularly major cities. To the like top 30 Westfield agents. This was last year. Top 30 Westfield agents in the country, President's Club or whatever they call them. Anyway, independent agents that do a lot of Westfield insurance. Okay, so I got called in to speak about the future of the insurance workforce, especially when it comes to account managers and CSRs. So the night before the presentation, we had a happy hour, and I walk into a room, and it's 30 old white guys, one black guy, and one woman. Those two were both Westfield sales managers. So 100% of the agency principals were old white men. And this is not Westfield's fault. It's just the reality of the industry. Okay. So I go back to my hotel room, and I'm thinking, how do I get the message across to them? Okay. And so what I ended up doing in the presentation the next day, first of all, I showed them, I grabbed one of their agencies in I don't know, Coldwater, Ohio or something. And I said, most of your career, you've been competing for talent in this geographic area. And I had a map like 30, 40 miles around. Going forward, you're competing for talent in this area. And I had the entire US. And I explained why. Like your people are going to get stolen away by people that let them be remote. Okay. And then demographically, men, at least in the US, again, I'm be very careful not to talk about Canada without numbers, but I'm guessing it reflects it. Men in the US are falling behind, right? I graduated college in 06. When I started school in 02 at Iowa State University, go Cyclones, at Iowa State University, the male to female ratio was about 50-50, okay? From then to now, in the US, something like 58% of college degrees have gone to women. Okay. My brother started school this fall. I just finished his first year at the University of Kansas, very similar school at Iowa State. The overall class of 2021, which is the one that I presented to Westfield, if you aggregate every university in the US, the overall freshman class, there are 2 women for every 1 guy. Right. And by the way, women graduate at a higher rate than guys. So basically, men are falling behind. Okay. So what does that mean for an agency owner? Okay. Those the account manager CSR roles have been historically staffed by high school educated women. That demographic, it doesn't exist going forward. You need and by the way, most of them, or at least many of them, don't want to be producers. So if you don't have a real career path, if you're not paying that role fairly compared to the producers, if you're not giving them the ability to gain equity in the company the way that the producers do, etc., you're just not going to keep them. Right. So what I did a presentation, I had a slide that and I said, raise your hands if you have daughters, if you have any daughters. More than half of the room, about half the room at least, raised their hands. And I said, okay, put your hands down. Raise your hands if you're raising your daughters to be CSRs and account managers. Not a single hand went up.
Wow.
You have to fix that role, which is a crucial role for your agency to function, has to be reworked completely.
Do you see it changing? I mean, I do think I'm speaking for some brokers that we know and certainly carriers, like we do see it changing here. I almost think it's changing fairly fast.
Awesome.
I don't know, Tan, and what you guys think, or Helen, but I I'm pretty connected just even from family wise and obviously background at Goose, but over the last 10, 20 years, but I do think it's changing. Like I see, and I see the different conversations, and I also wonder if there's a realm of the millennial is now running the brokerage. And I'm starting to see that, whether it's family or ties or what have you. And I see that that behavior changing quickly. And
Yeah.
it's
That
not,
is fantastic news.
you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not, I think it's still been slow, but go ahead, Helen. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking specifically even my sales force and the evolution of, yes, maybe, you know, when I look back 6 years ago, 7 years ago, a lot more male dominated for sure. It is very female driven in today's world, but in my mind, as I'm hearing Tony talk, I'm going through different concepts and thought processes. And then I'm thinking, now that we do have more women in our producer force specifically, but I'm also going to say, I think it's because they want to be the breadwinners. They're the ones earning the more money. When I step back and really look at some of the dynamics, because I know them, because I've worked with them for a while, some don't have children, to be fair and frank, right? So is it the producing force for females aren't able to have or don't have children yet because of the dedication or drive that they're putting forward? Could it be that, and it's a topic we've touched on a little bit in some other podcasts, is they're having children later in life, focusing on their careers now, and then having their children later so they can insert their full energy and passion and make their money and do all of those things so that they can have their children later. So I think it's very different. There's lots of thoughts floating around my head. That's for sure, hearing those statements.
With the remote flexibility, though, for someone like me, who's on the executive team, I have a lot of responsibilities, but I also have 2 very young children, and I'm fully remote. So that flexibility to be like, oh, my kid's sick, pick her up from daycare, plop her in front of Helen, finish my meeting, finish my projects. If I didn't have that flexibility, we would be in a very different situation.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, like I think I'm pretty proud of all the companies that we work for. I even just see it. I see, you know, your CEOs, you know, Tanya, Diane, and Helen, and just the support. Like, so anyways, I don't know about Canada versus US, but
No.
I'm very optimistic on how it's changing, but I do think there's a long way to go, and it'll be interesting to get feedback on this podcast. I find that whole CSR account management layer fascinating for multiple different reasons, and I think my passion lies in the fact that I was there, I was that person. It's such a critical role, and I think that it's so valuable at the leadership level. And yeah, I think
it's a critical role to build that foundation for moving up in your insurance career.
Absolutely.
That's where you
Absolutely.
90% of that hands-on learning that I think you need in order to really lead a team. Without that, like, you don't.
Yeah. I still think, going back to an early statement Tony said, which is we don't do a good enough job, and you were speaking specifically to the States about promoting insurance in universities, high schools. We don't do that here either. That's very clear. We have a couple of colleges that offer the insurance program. I believe there may be 1 or 2 pieces in a university that does it as well, but it's not in all of our universities. It's also, let's go back to, I'm a lot older than you guys, but going back even to high school, when we did home economics, you didn't even talk about insurance. You didn't, you did those basics. Here's your baby, go burp it. And you're partnered with someone it's true. That was my home economics, right? You get the kid for 12 hours or 24 hours. You also partnered up with someone in home economics, and that's how they taught you about the world. Well,
that was not my experience. I would have died, Helen. We had like,
actually, I think that was my experience too.
Had a budget. You had to figure out how to like pay rent. Oh yeah,
I think that was my experience too. I think we had a baby. I think we had a fake robot baby, and we had to make sure that fake baby was not crying and a bunch of
and then it reported something back, because like there was
like that half a year course that teaches you about the really important stuff in grade 12 only.
The half a year course. There's the key. There's the key word. Half a year to prep them for life.
Yeah. So when I was with the PYB, the Professional Young Insurance Brokers, we used to go to that like we'd go to high schools in that course and be like,
Fantastic.
come be a broker. And they'd be like, no, that's a horrible decision. And we'd go do, at the colleges, we had a bursary that we would award somebody graduating from that program. And there were some years we went and there were like 7 graduates in the whole thing. And they all went to be claims adjusters. I don't know.
Well, that's all they want to do. And I'm personal lines, so for a little bit, they also all want to go straight into commercial.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah.
Personal lines doesn't pay well. It's getting automated away. And client contact, whether you're trying to sell to them, you're trying to service it, or you're handling claims, it's a lot more stressful than commercial lines where you're dealing with a professional of some sort that has some understanding of insurance. It's outside of the DI conversation, but yeah, personal lines and claims both have serious issues in the way that we do it when it comes to building a career around them. So yes, very quickly people tend to make the move to commercial lines because it's just a better career as of right now.
Yeah.
So Tony, we're coming up on time. I do want to just quickly have any last thoughts. We didn't even get to talk about insure equity. We didn't get to talk about a lot of maybe part 2, or if you have a couple extra minutes.
Yeah, no, I've got a little time. No worries at all. A little low on computer battery, but I just plugged in my my battery a little bit. Quite simply, we have to get this right. In an era where historically in insurance, people would fall into it by accident and stay out of loyalty and out of not wanting to do resume damage by switching companies too often, right? That doesn't exist anymore. There's no penalty as long as you're not switching jobs every year, 5 years in a row, like I did. There's no. Luckily, 4 of those were within Nationwide, but there's no resume damage to making a move. It's incredibly easy to steal your people away with the tools that we have today. They don't even need to move because of a remote first world once you've trained them. So as an industry, we have to get this right. And millennials consider DEI to be very important. Gen Zers consider it to be non-negotiable. So quite simply, as the boomers retire, otherwise all you have left is Gen Xers, which is a much smaller generation in number of people. We have to get this right. Insurance Nerds published a book called Undiscovered Voices by an agent out of Texas called Sarah Mooney's. And when Sarah reached out, she said, I want to tell my story of what it's been like to be a woman in insurance. Texas is a deeply conservative state. She has spent her entire career in Texas. And she will say it herself that she's not a great writer. So it took a lot of work. But the first few drafts, when I read them, I was like, this woman has to be insane. Like there is no way that all of this happened to her. And so I gave the book to my co-founder Carly and a very good friend Taryn Haas, and between the two of them, and I gave the advice, Sarah, go and talk to other insurance women and get their stories too. So we'll make the book your story, but we'll weave in other women's stories. And she found just a mountain of similar stories. And I realized that I didn't live it, but it's a reality of our industry in the 2020s. That we, especially in the agency space where we have much smaller companies, it does happen in the carrier space too. And then I met Elisa Stamp, who runs Insure Equality. If you guys haven't had her, you have to. Elisa's a force of nature. And the what she went through, both in her career job and then in her agency job before starting Insure Equality, absolutely horrifying. And again, we're talking in the 2020s. And then my longtime girlfriend Renee, who had massive career growth very quickly. The NDA has expired, so she can now talk about it. We just can't say the company name, but I don't want to tell her story. The book's on the way. It's in the editing process. But let's just say that she had massive growth, and the last promotion went so badly when it comes to being treated equally as the men who had lesser performance than her. So much so that she ended up leaving not only the company but the industry. Right, and we're talking about a serious overperformer, a serious rock star that had gone from account manager to VP in a matter of 6 years, who was running an organization of 220 people at a 40,000 people company, and we lost her. Even I can't convince her to come back to the industry. Right? How many more Renees are there that leave our industry disgusted and choose the Renee path, go in a different direction, as opposed to the Elisa Stamp path, which is I'm going to change this. Yeah. Right, and it's a giant loss of talent for our industry. It's not only morally wrong, it's also just bad business.
Yeah,
we call that the Peter Pan effect, where men fail upwards in leadership and women tend to burn out because there are different expectations in the leadership level.
As I travel around talking about Insure Equality, the way that I introduce Insure Equality, I'm on the board, by the way, is full disclosure, right? InsureEquality.org if you're not familiar. But the way that I talk about Insure Equality, it's a newer organization that is focused not just on education, but on accountability. Okay. Yeah. And education is important, but I'm a big believer that at least in the U.S. carrier space and probably in the large brokers, everybody's heard this. It's not a matter of education. Everybody has DI committees at these large companies, and employee social groups, and LGBT group, women's group, and all that. What it looks like is that a lot of what the big carriers are doing is DEI kabuki theater, not real change. And I get it. If you're an older white male and you were raised, I have the same MBA, right? Like I did my MBA in 2011, and we were still taught that our only job is to maximize shareholder value, right? Hopefully Canada has better laws than that. But if that's how you were raised and how your entire education, your entire career was, of course you're going to think that DEI is PR.
Right.
Right. But ask your kids, and I guarantee you they don't think of DEI as PR.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking, is like, I'm wondering, like, what the change. I think that the generation coming up, right, is running these brokerages, and boomers are going out. I do think that it has a big impact on this change.
Yeah.
Overall.
One question that comes up a lot when I talk about accountability around the AI, people go, "Oh, quotas are horrible." We're not talking quotas. We're not talking because the problem with quotas is they lead to tokenism, and that doesn't help us either. My goal is that I'll probably never retire, but I hope that the day I die at 103 years old, hopefully, that I hope that we're at the point where if we choose 2 or 10 random kids at the State Farm call center, or whatever the entry level job is at that point in our industry, that basically if we choose them today and we look at them again 20 years from now, all I want is for each of them to have had the same chance of making it to the top.
Mm.
Right? Let the best person win. Like, I don't want to kill the meritocracy, but that's not what's happening right now. Right now, the leadership is completely dominated by cisgender straight white males, and often a Black woman leading HR.
Yeah.
Mm.
And Tony, it happens at the lower levels too, like childhood. You know, I'm a little immigrant child of Lebanese parents that owned a corner store. I didn't know about importance of connections and networking, and like there's you know, I didn't know people in the industry coming in. And so there are things at the childhood, high school level that insurance companies can be doing to help even mentor different minority groups and, you know.
Mm.
I think that's interesting about flipping it. Like, this is not about pointing fingers. The bigger mantra here is about helping the next generation. Like, and it should have happened a long time ago. But to me, I think that is so powerful in flipping the script from, this isn't about pointing fingers, this isn't about calling people out per se.
Mhm.
This is more about what do we want the industry to look like in 30, 40, 50 years from now, right?
Assuming that
I love the way your mind thinks. Like, we just need to have more thinking like that.
assuming that the listenership of the podcast at this point is largely women, going by both what the research says and my experience at chatwithtony.com, women are less likely to apply for the job unless they have 100% of what's listed as required. The men are applying at 30%. In insurance,
That's our favorite stat. It's my favorite stat.
In insurance, if you have like 50%, apply. Let them reject you. Apply. Okay. Number two, women are less likely to negotiate salary. Negotiate. The men are negotiating. Negotiate.
Mhm.
It's part of the reason we continue to have a pay gap. Is because women make the assumption women are good at negotiating for their people.
Yep.
They don't negotiate for themselves.
Which says so much. Which, that whole statement, where they're good at negotiating for their people. So what does that say? Their people are their colleagues, their team, which is the same thing. Their clients, and you put those people at the top. What do you think's going to happen?
So it's not even the women. Yeah, it's not even the women are bad negotiators. Please negotiate for the salary. And by the way,
sorry, Tony. We don't advocate for ourselves. We will advocate, to Jen's point and your point just now. We advocate for all of those other people around us, because that's predominantly the way we've been brought up and the way we feel good about ourselves as well. But we don't do it for our own self, which is the reason of the gap.
Each individual woman not advocating for themselves when they get a new job, when they change companies, whatever, keeps the pay gap from closing. So so women, please help the overall industry and help every other woman by negotiating. And the hardest thing to do when you get a promotion internally, negotiate. The worst piece of advice that I ever gave, okay, and I need to be really careful, what was to my girlfriend Renee, when she got a third major promotion in 4 years, and in that last promotion where she became a VP, my advice was not to negotiate because she was an internal candidate. And I learned later that was the wrong advice. So now I'm very careful, like negotiate, because the men are negotiating.
Fair.
Good advice.
But I think that's the best advice and a great place to even wrap it up, and because it's a lot of thoughtful moments, I think, as we all listen to that statement from our own experiences, as also other people listening as well, to our tribe of community that listen to us faithfully, probably thinking the same things, going, that's a very valid point and heartfelt, right? It's the piece to take home.
I think all of us on a call maybe except one person, probably didn't negotiate much,
Mm.
you know? So yeah, because you're taught just to be happy with what you get, and then you have imposter
Yeah.
syndrome. I can't ask for too much.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's good.
Absolutely.
We should do a session on how to negotiate for women, actually.
I have
Yes.
a podcast guest who wrote a book for women on how to negotiate.
Okay.
I don't remember her name right now, but if you send me a message, I'll look at my
That would be
and like I'd be happy to make an introduction. Because
awesome.
yeah, she'd be fantastic, and you guys probably have better questions that I had.
There's like 4 books you mentioned that I'm like adding to my reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll link them.
Can
in
we
the-
link that?
Yeah, we'll link that in the thing, or in the launch. But yeah, I think I'm very excited. Like even coming off of IBA and some of this, and this attention on this podcast is like I'm very excited about the diversity in the skill set, and I think that if you look at you look at a sports team, right? It's like you can't win without all the different skill sets. And I don't care about what's happened before. I mean, yes, there's been multi-billion-dollar businesses built I fine. But all I'm saying is we're going to win, bigger, faster with having all skill sets at the table, all people at the table. And I think that's really cool. And I think there's been a big missing link there. And I think there's just a missing link for sure.
Tony, I think we're going to wrap it up here. It was so great to have you on our podcast. You left us with a lot of really crucial information, a lot of important stats, important takeaways that we're going to share with everyone. We're going to link everything you mentioned below in the description box, and we're definitely going to have you back, Tony.
Yeah.
Anytime. Awesome. My pleasure.
Really
3, 4, 5.
Yeah. And maybe Renee, if she wants to come on when the book is published, or like do some pre-press.
Founder,
the story. I mean, I read some of her blogs. She's very impressive. And yeah, so thanks again, Tony. Thank you, risk takers, for tuning in today. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.